Hello student, welcome to EPG Pathsala. I am Dr. Ajit Jaswal from Department of Anthropology, Pondicherry Central University, Puducherry. Today we are going to discuss about a module entitled Human Origin and Evolution under paper Physical and Biological Anthropology. So student, let us see what we are going to learn from this module. The main purpose of this module is to understand the concept of origin of life on earth, how life originated on the earth. This module also intended to acquaint the student with some of the significant issues like evolution of man and what are the evidences of evolution. So let's try to find out the answer of one of the important questions about how did life originated or how the origin of life took place. This question has perplexed many scientists and philosophers throughout the human history to think about that how did life originated? What are the factors? What are the conditions? Why the life originated? There was a time when it was believed that life arose spontaneously from non-living matter. They think that the lives were generally arises or arose from some non-living matter where it is where the life is altogether absent. It was thought that the fish or frog both are living in water or muddy like environment. They formed from a mud. Similarly, they believe that the maggot, what is called immature insect, immature fly, they arose from decaying meat. And they also think that insects were formed from plant juice, because whenever they find in the same condition. They find fish and frog in the mud. Maggots, whenever we keep the meat for some time, we find the appearance of maggot. Whenever we keep the juices of plant or animal, we find the appearance of insect. So that even the microorganism, they think that they arose spontaneously from air and water or water vapor. Until the great French microbiologist Louis Pasteur, who finally discarded such theory of spontaneous generation and demonstrated once for all the life originated only from pre-existing life. According to the theory given by Louis Pasteur, he gave a clear-cut explanation that the life not originated from non-living matter as it was thought earlier, or it was thinking during spontaneous generation theory, but they have clearly explained through scientific explanation that their life has originated from some pre-existing life, either because of certain conditions that provided or that helped them to the generation of basic material of the life and ultimately the primitive life, and from the primitive life to the modern life. But the concept, the previous thought or earlier, there was also many people think that life was created by supernatural power or called God. Example given by Father Soros, that life was originated from some supernatural creature or it was created by God in a week or 6 days or 7 days. But the final concept about the origin of life or origination of life is mostly scientifically it came from pre-existing life or the primitive life, and ultimately we find the development of origin of a life. Scientific hypothesis for origin of life. How then did life originated in the first place? Charles Darwin, in a letter to his friend and distinguished botanist Sir Joseph Hooker, provided a clue to this puzzle when he wrote, "If we could conceive in some warm little pond with all sort of ammonia and phosphoric salt, heat, electricity, etc., present that a protein compound was chemically formed, the idea that life could have originated on the primordial earth or the primitive earth, even though it might not today, because the conditions on the primordial earth were rather different from those that we see today. A detailed theory based on this idea was proposed in the year 1923 by the Russian biochemist A.J. Operon and G.R.S. Halden in 1928. The primitive Earth. There is evidence that the Earth was formed about 46 million years ago by the condensation of the cloud of cosmic dust and gas. At the time of its formation, the Earth was hot. As the Earth began to cool, its matter began to condense so that solid, liquid as well as gases could coexist. Recent studies suggest that simple one-cell organisms, somewhat similar to today's cyanobacteria, were present in the Earth about 3600 million years ago. This finding suggests that the life originated somewhat between 4600 and 3600 million years ago. Let's discuss about the condition on the primordial Earth. About 3600 million years ago, conditions were startlingly different from those found today. The Earth's atmosphere at that time was reducing and not oxidizing as it is today. Large quantity of hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen and water vapor, carbon dioxide, lipid and amino acids were present on the primitive Earth, not oxygen. But free oxygen is unlikely to have been present in any significant amount. The Operon-Halden theory suggests that complex organic molecules would have been formed through a series of chemical reactions in the Earth's primordial soup, or the Darwin's warm little pond. The theory also reasons that make available in the form of heat, cosmic rays and lightning to drive this chemical reaction. Miller and Urey carried out an experiment to explain the phenomena of molecules of life. Stanley Miller and Harold C. Urey put the Operon-Halden theory to test in the year 1953 by recreating in the laboratory the probable condition on the primitive Earth. They found a large number of complex organic compounds, including some amino acids such as glycine and aspartic acid. The essential building block of living organisms, that is protein, could thus have been formed on the primitive Earth. And later on, all the other basic components of life were developed in the lab. Now let's discuss about the molecules to cell, how from molecules development of cell take place. The real problem that scientists faces in explaining the origin of life is how protein and nucleic acid that might have been formed on the primitive Earth, and these molecules became organized to form cell. The figure on this slide explains the Miller and Urey experiment and also how from molecules to cell develop. As we have already discussed about this thing, that Miller and Urey, they carried out an experiment in the laboratory to find out the probable conditions of development of life. The probable conditions of the development of even the primitive Earth. They found a large number of complex organic compounds, including some amino acid such as glycine and aspartic acid, which is known to be the building block material or the raw material of the building block material, protein. And from proteins we have found a number of other material. Later on, all the other basic components of life were developed from this protein. Other diagrams indicate the development from molecules to cell. As we all know that the real problem that scientists faces is in explaining the origin of life is how protein and nucleic acid that might have been formed on the primitive Earth become organized to form a cell. Life on other planets. If all these events occur on the primordial Earth, could they not also have occurred on some other planet? While most planets may not have the necessary condition for the origin of life, there are at least 10 stars in the universe which seem to have planets, and thus even if only one in a million billion planets has the appropriate condition, we would still have 7 or 8 planets on which life could have originated. In fact, one solution that has occasionally been suggested for the origin of life is that it is somehow infected by primitive form of life through space. For this reason, search for life on other planets is being seriously pursued. Now let's try to define evolution. What is evolution? In a very generalized term, we can say that evolution is a descent with modification. But this modification may be positive in nature, may be negative in nature. Because evolution is a continuous process. It keeps on going. It is altogether non-stopping process. As Darwin saw evolution as a gradual unfolding of a new variety of life from the previous form of life over a longer period of time. Means there is an unfolding take place, changes take place from previous to newer form, but it took a lot of time also. This depiction of what most of us think as evolution, and it is indeed the end result of evolutionary process. By this long-term effort can also came about by the accumulation of many small evolutionary changes which occurring every generation. While mutagenists or mutationists were arguing with selectionists about single primary mechanism in evolution, several population geneticists began to realize that both small genetical changes and a natural selection were necessary ingredient and in evolutionary formula. So it is not just small genetical changes, but also it is a natural selection. The pressure, the forces is also play a very active role in the formation of a descent which is modified. If the selection is negative in nature, it may lead to the extinction of that species also, that we have seen in many cases. Similarly, if the genetical changes is not adaptive to the change environment, not suited to the modified environment, this also lead to the negative evolution, or the evolution which may not be suited for their survival in the future. Evolution of man. The origin and evolution of man, the wonderful and glory of the universe, has been the most attractive and complicated problem of the man itself or himself since the time immemorial. Religion had set a false and dominant until the last century, when Charles Darwin was able to put forward his theory of evolution of organic world. Until the middle of 19th century, it was supposed that life, including man, had been created by supernatural power, that is God. Various theories were put to explain such type of origin, like Father Severidge put his special creation theory. Similarly, Lucretius was of the opinion that man was born directly out of earth. He called man as babies born of the womb of earth. Philosophers like Socrates, Aristotle, Hippocrates, who studies human body and put man in the animal kingdom. Carl Linnaeus placed man in its proper position in animal kingdom. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution gave a severe blow to the religion conception that about origin of man and revolutionized this particular topic. His work on descent of man and selection in relation to sex has provided important proof of the human descent from other anthropoids. If we see the concept of evolution in modern population, then it can be said that the process of evolution act on all species including human. In modern population, recombination and mutation continue to provide variation, the fuel for natural selection. Can we then see this ongoing evolutionary process at work in human population? Human population continue to be influenced by the process of evolution, continue to adapt to their biocultural environment, and thus continue to value the process of evolution. Evidences of evolution. There are convincing evidence, enough evidence to support that man has not been created by God, but through evolutionary mechanisms, through several natural selection mechanisms, through several genetical mechanisms, through several mechanisms or through several changes from a common ancestor of anthropoid like chimpanzee and gorilla. The evidences of evolution we can see in the comparative context of morphological features. We have seen there is a morphological modification take place in the skeletal remains from different animals, starting from either from the early primates to the modern primates. We can see the modification in the hand, we can see the modification in the legs, we can see the modification in the skull. We can also directly see the changes in their dietary pattern, changes in the skeletal region, changes in several other features, which shows that it is in favor of development to the evolution of modern human being. Similarly, we can see the evidences from comparative physiological changes. Even in the physiological features, we have seen that the primitive and modern, there is quite similarities there, and whatever changes that take place, that is in favor of positive evolution, in favor of development and formation of modern human beings. Similarly, even the embryological evidences, the comparative embryological evidences shows that the embryo of fish, amphibian, reptiles, mammals, especially within the mammals also, they all are, even though see there is a great differences there, fishes, amphibian, even especially from amphibian, reptiles, birds and mammals. We can see the reptile, birds and mammals embryos initial phase, they all look very similar to each other. We cannot make the distinction whether it is embryo of reptiles or even the rabbits or even some small animals which are mammalian in nature, or even the human beings. They all seems to look like a common shaped. Similarly, we have a direct evidence from the fossil. The comparative paleontological evidences also shows that there is a complete evolution, a unidirectional evolution or a specific directional evolution take place from the common ancestors of anthropoids, that is chimpanzee and gorilla. So there are number of evidences which is very supportive in nature to support that man has evolved from the ancestral form, not from some other unnatural means, not by created by God, or not from a non-living creature. It is created or developed from some creature or some living beings or some group of animal which more or less contain some of the primitive characteristics of human beings. Especially genetically, we have seen there is a great similarity between chimpanzee and Homo sapiens. Now let's discuss about another important topic of evolution, that is variation. Variation are dissimilarities which help in distinguishing one member of the species from another. It is commonly observed that no two individuals are completely alike. Even dissimilarities can be made in two identical twins. The heritable variations contribute to evolution. In the absence of variation, no change can occur, without which evolution is not possible. That it is the fact that variation constitute the basic requirement for evolution, or it provides the raw material for evolution. Variation can be classified as follows. It may be grouped in four pair or contrasting nature. First, continuous and discontinuous variation. Second, germinal and acquired variation. Third, determinate and indeterminate variation. Fourth, meristic and substantive variation. Now let's discuss about the continuous and discontinuous variation. Continuous variations are those variations which are always quantitative and found in a graded series. They are the minute changes which can be seen as in an organism generation after generation, and ultimately they lead to the occurrence of new well-formed character. Whereas at the discontinuous variation, these sudden changes which are not repetitive or series in nature, or the discontinuous variations are sport or mutation. Darwin has not considered them for the purpose of evolution, but modern researchers have shown their significance for evolution. Let's discuss about germinal and acquired variation. Germinal variations are also known as blastogenic. Those variations which originate inside the body are intrinsic in nature in the germ cell are known as germinal variations. They are inherited and transmitted to the offspring. They are not affected from environmental factors. Germinal variations are two types: arising from chromosomal changes or arising by the change in particular gene. Next is acquired variation. It is called as somatogenic. Those variations which are produced in the somatic cell of the body as an effect of environmental factor are the somatogenic variation. They are the acquired characters during the lifetime based on the use and disuse of organs. They are intrinsic and non-heritable in nature. Example: better developed muscle in an athletics, or slender wrist in European and American ladies, or loss of eyes in cave dwellers. Next is determinate and indeterminate variation. Determinate variations are those variations which occur in certain definite lines and directions are known as determinate variation. These variations are usually in adaptive direction. They are also known as orthogenic variations, as they also take place in a definite line in the evolutionary theory. This is also called as theory of orthogenesis. In the case of meristic and substantive variation, meristic variations are those variations which occur in any part but in number only. That is, example is a presence of 6 fingers instead of 5, which is normal number, or presence of 13 ribs instead of 12, which is the normal number. In the case of substantive variation, these are those variations which effect upon size, weight, shape, color, and form of body, not on number. For example, variation in the length of finger, shape of nose and ear. Causes of variations. Here we are trying to understand what are the causes of acquired or external variations and what are the causes of germinal or internal variations. Let's discuss about the causes of acquired or external variation. These are caused during the lifetime of an individual because of the external influence, that is the environmental factor, or scarcity or abundance of food, or because of heat or cold conditions, or because of use or disuse. These variations are only for individual and not for the race. They are not heritable in nature, and so they don't have any concern with evolution. Whereas the cause of germinal variations are, these are the heritable variation, and so they are in close concern of evolution. The cause of these variations are as follows. The causes of these variations are: first, biparental parentage, which is also called as amphimixis. Biparental parentage is a principal cause of it. It is well known that during sexual reproduction, the zygote receive germ plasm from both male and female parents. Half of the chromosomes come from the mother and half from the father. In this view, new combinations take place, which are the cause of variation in the offspring. Second, all individuals have the inherent tendency to vary. Third, variation also occur due to the abnormalities in the process of meiosis. Next, external influences such as X-ray and ultraviolet rays also causes the modification in the germ plasm. And the last important cause is secretion of endocrine gland are also up to some extent the cause of germinal variations. Now student, let's try to summarize the important points of this module. There was a time when it was believed that life arose simultaneously from non-living matter. There is evidence for that the earth was formed about 46 million years ago. About 3600 million years ago, condition was strikingly different from those of today found today. The Operon-Halden theory suggests that complex organic molecules would have been formed through a series of chemical reactions in the earth primordial soup or primitive environment, or we might say Darwin's warm little pond. The primordial soup is also called as Darwin's pond, warm little pond. The presence of abundant free oxygen on the earth today is thought to prevent abiotic origin of life. The first photosynthetic organisms were cyanobacteria. On today's earth, therefore, as Louis Pasteur showed that life originated only from pre-existing life, not from non-living creature. The real problem that scientist faces in explaining the origin of life is how protein and nucleic acid that might have been formed on the primitive earth became organized to form cell. They are a little bit in confusions that how this chemical organic material can be converted into a living creature called a cell. But it is quite true, they have experimentally proved that they through Miller and Urey experiment that developed amino acid, and that amino acid, which is altogether a unit of protein, which converted into later on protein and nucleic acid. From this nucleic acid, chemically, biochemically, we can say that a development of cells takes place. But there are many questions is there. Most planets may not have necessary condition for the origin of life. Why? That is a big question that we try to find out. As we have already discussed that Darwin saw evolution as a gradual unfolding, that is a gradual process, and because of the unfolding of new varieties of form, previously from means it is altogether conversion from the primitive form to the modern form slowly through some accumulation, reduction, and ultimately modification and development of new forms take place. But evolution is not an unusual or mysterious process. It is a two-stage process. One, there is a continuous genetic variation that may have occurred, and distributed before it can be acted upon by natural selection. So genetical changes must have a relationship along with natural selection. Ultimately, evolution take place. The process of evolution act on all species, including human being, Homo sapiens, what we call it. They are convincing evidence to support that man has not been created by God, but through evolutionary mechanism from the common ancestors like chimpanzee and gorilla. And it may be because variation has taken place. Each and every variation had ultimately development of a new species or development of a more advanced species. So variation constitute the basic requirement for evolution. Thank you.